Hello everyone. So I welcome you all. I welcome all the judges and the participants. So if you can just tell me who will be the first presenter so we can go ahead with the session. Who will be our first presenter on the list?
I think Dr. Rohit is the first speaker.
Dr. Rohit is the first speaker.
Hello. Yes. Hello.
Going to talk on the
Dr. Rohit, how are you?
long-term
I'm good. Hi.
survival.
Hi,
All
Dr.
the
Ravi.
best for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ravi.
Excuse me, ma'am. This is Dr. Pavitra here. I have a presentation in another hall at around 10:15. So can I know my sequence here?
Dr. Pavitra. So yes. So Dr. Lavingya, I would request you to please tell her like what number is she doing her presentation today.
Hello.
Okay, if you now have to do that,
Dr.
Sorry.
Dr. Pavitra.
Sorry, ma'am.
Elder hall है ना?
Pavitra wants.
नहीं यार ये this is an
can't hear.
elder hall ना trauma.
Ma'am, the voice was
Yeah.
not audible.
I think Dr. Pavitra can go in next, ma'am, as the next speaker.
First speaker, Dr. Bang. Let him continue. Dr. Bang should continue.
And the next speaker would be Dr. Pavitra.
Okay.
So let
Thank you so
let
much.
Dr. Bang be ready.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Should we start?
Sure, you can start with your presentation. So we have a presenter, Dr. Rohit.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. At the outset, I'm thankful to the organizers of AIC 2021 for this virtual meet. I'm Dr. Rohit Bang, and with your all consent, I would like to present this study, which is a long-term graft survival in a cases of penetrating keratoplasty versus DALK or deep interlamellar keratoplasty. This is nil financial disclosures. A brief history as such, we all know that in 1906, the Ziem, who was the one who had first performed a corneal transplant, and obviously it was a full thickness corneal transplant that he had gone ahead with. Subsequently, Alshnik in 1920 reported a clinical series of corneal transplants, and then there was subsequently something called as partial PK or partial penetrating keratoplasty, and what he meant by that was a lamellar keratoplasty. Filato, he reported 800 grafts from 1920 to 45. So the purpose of the present study was to retrospectively analyze long-term graft survival in a cases of a penetrating keratoplasty versus deep interlamellar keratoplasty. How did this present study go about? It was the primary grafts of DALK or deep interlamellar keratoplasty, which were around 114, and a penetrating keratoplasty, which were 187, performed for optical indications that were retrospectively analyzed. This is a long-term study, and the time span that was considered was almost around 10 years that we had been following the patients with us. The primary outcome measure that was seen was only the graft survival time. So we were focused on the clarity of the graft. We all know that a lot of other parameters can be seen, but then what we were focused for this present study was the graft survival. And the Kaplan-Meier survival plots were used with a Mantel-Cox log rank test that were used to compare the curves. This is a small photograph. What we had, something what we call is as an antique piece of a watermelon plug or the square grafts that were used in the initial days before the circular grafts had become by default as such. Coming to the results as such, the 10-year survival rate was 93.9% or close to 94% for a deep interlamellar keratoplasty and 72% for PKP. The post-op complications obviously were higher for PKP as compared to DALK, like a glaucoma, which was around 29.3% for a PK as compared to 11.6% for a DALK. The allograft rejection stands around 16.6% for a PKP and only 1.7% for a DALK. And epithelial problems because of surface issues, which were 10.4% for a PKP and 5.5% for a DALK cases. The rate of graft failure attributable to the rejection was 36.7% for PKP, while only 5.9% for a DALK. And the endothelial failure was around 36.7% for a PKP and 5.9% for a DALK. As you can see, all the complications were lesser in the cases of a DALK, as it's a surface procedure and we are not going right inside the entry chamber as compared to the PKP. Now, this is a diagram which shows the graft survival. In a DALK cases, it was around, you can see 93% at the end of 10 years, while in a PKP, it is around 72%. Now, going further into the results as such, as you can see, the blue one depicts the glaucoma, the saffron one, the epithelial issues, and the gray one, the allograft rejection episodes. In the cases of a DALK, you can see that the issues were lesser, around 11% for glaucoma, around 6% epithelial issues in the cases of a DALK, and only around 1 or 2% allograft rejection in case of a DALK. As compared to PKP, you can see the glaucoma was close to around 30%. Similarly, the epithelial issues were around 11 or 12%, and allograft rejection stands around 16%. Now, the severe complications of PKP, right from the initial days, right from our fellowship, we had seen that it could lead to a very frequent endophthalmitis from a retained suture material and expulsive hemorrhage from even a mild or a blunt trauma also. Now, this is just to highlight how quiet the eye is in a cases of a DALK, where you have got a hydrops also, where you can do a manual DALK and the entry chamber remains quiet as such. Now, to enumerate the few advantages of a DALK, there could be a lesser chances of a rejection as the endothelium is not replaced, longer graft survival, as you can see in the present study. The globe integrity is better, and this is a faster visual rehabilitation as suture removal can also be expedited. On the other hand, disadvantages of PKP could be compromised globe integrity, higher chances of graft rejection and a failure, obviously secondary glaucoma, longer visual rehabilitation, and early cataractogenesis if the patient is phakic. So to conclude, the 10 years graft survival for primary DALK was superior to that of a PKP. The primary DALK, it results in a significantly less postoperative complications and obviously lower rates of a graft rejection, and study strengthens the case in a favor of a performing DALK or a PKP whenever we have a suitable patient with a functioning endothelium. Thank you.
So since the presentation is over, if we have any questions from the judges, questions from the judges.
Dr. Rohit, what was the rate of endothelial rejection in your patients with DALK?
Endothelial issues were seen in around 1.2% of the cases.
Because it is very rare in DALK,
Yes,
because the
yes,
endothelium is
yes.
a patient's own.
Yes.
So it's invariably the stromal rejection which leads to the endothelial rejection in DALK patients.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
never the primary endothelial rejection. Anybody else wants to ask?
A very good morning to everyone. I would like to ask Rohit, nice study and a long-term follow-up. You didn't mention about the rates of infectious keratitis in PKP or in DALK if it had happened.
I mean, in cases of a DALK, we never had any as such an infectious keratitis. We did had a sutural infiltrates or immune infiltrates, and the epithelial issues that I had tried to mention. In cases of PKP, the epithelial issues were secondary to the infectious keratitis that we had. So I had mentioned the epithelial issues around 11% in the cases of PKP.
Okay, and regarding the graft survival, what all parameters were used to see the long-term graft survival?
Ma'am, like I initially said, it was only the graft clarity that we were trying to see in these cases. Now, if we keep on like best corrected visual acuity or astigmatism, a lot of other parameters can be studied. But for the sake of this study or to keep it simple, the graft clarity was the only thing that we were looking for, as it was a very long-term study, and we didn't had every patient that we had operated, we didn't had a long this follow-up. So wherever the patient was accessible and was in touch with us, we were looking for only the graft survival or clarity of the graft as such.
So what was it, a photographic documentation like in the long term? Because different people might take graph clarity to be like different sorts of grading. Like somebody can call it a graph clarity some grade, and some other person might quantify it to be something else.
Yes, ma'am. It was a photographic documentation of a patient whenever he had reported to us in a serial follow-up.
Okay. And no endothelial cell counts monitoring were done in the long run, is it?
Endothelial cell count monitoring was done, but primarily what we were looking here was the graph clarity. So I had not tried to emphasize about the endothelial survival here. Because comparing endothelial survival was not the primary objective of this study.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so we can move ahead towards our next presenter.
Thank you.
I'll share the screen, sir. Can I start my presentation? Am I audible?
Yeah, you are
Yes,
audible.
you
Please
can
start.
Can I start?
Yeah.
Okay. A very good morning to all. At the outset, none of the authors have any financial interest. So my topic for today's presentation is rituals to prevent development of visually significant corneal haze after PRK or cross-linking surgery. So currently there are two surgeries where despite the good outcomes topographically, clinically, the patient is unhappy because of haze. So which led to a research question about what is driving this haze. And this brings us to the purpose of our study, which is to evaluate the potential risk factors in patients developing postoperative haze, to develop a risk scoring system, and to get a prophylactic management of these risk factors to mitigate postoperative haze. This work of ours has been recently published. Now, our study had two arms, a retrospective and a prospective arm. Arm one was a retrospective study where around 250 patients of PRK and 180 patients of cross-linking were evaluated to identify the risk factors and develop a scoring system. Arm 2 was a prospective interventional study where the patients were graded according to the risk score and managed accordingly. Now, all patients who had undergone PRK or cross-linking surgery were assessed at 3, 6, and 12 months clinically and using densitometry from Scheimpflug topographer. And it was found that 8% of the patients of PRK and 12% of the cross-linking patients had developed significant subepithelial haze at the end of 6 months. And this cohort also had 13 patients who had low vitamin D, 7 patients who had high OSDI, and 3 patients who had ocular surface inflammation. Now we had preserved the epithelium at the time of surgery in the biorepository at our GROW laboratory at -80 degrees Celsius. So this epithelium of patients who developed haze was extracted back and it was analyzed using quantitative PCR technique to study the expression of various genes. And we found that these patients had inflammation to begin with, which led to abnormal ECM remodeling, which in turn led to abnormal wound healing. Thus, a thorough clinical and molecular assessment was done after taking all the factors into consideration. And thereby, we created a risk scoring system and a perfect score with an aim to mitigate the postoperative corneal haze. And this was then applied to the prospective arm of our study. Thus, we identified the certain risk factors which were playing role in the development of haze post-surgery. These were mainly OSDI, vitamin D, contact lens intolerance, gland dropout rates, TBUT, working environment, and MMP9 kits. Now, why OSDI? So now it has been published by our team that that higher OSDI is associated with low vitamin D levels and abnormal nerves, suggestive of higher inflammation. Now, patients with contact lens intolerance is also depictive of presence of unhealthy nerves, dendritic cells, which is again suggestive of unhealthy ocular surface. Also, working environment played a very important role. UVB exposure after PRK surgery prolongs the stromal healing response, which is manifested by increasing keratocyte numbers and deposition of disorganized collagen in the anterior stroma, leading to late onset haze. So thus we categorize the patients into low, moderate, and high risk. This was then applied to a prospective interventional arm. Now we designed a perfect score, which included some rituals done preoperatively, intraoperatively, and postoperatively with the objective of minimizing postoperative haze and scarring. So if the preoperative score was less than 5, patients were directly taken for surgery, and it was more than 10, the patients were treated accordingly with doxycycline, steroid eye drops, cyclosporin, and also vitamin D supplements were given if it was low. Intraoperatively, we injected 0.2 ml of 0.45% ketorolac of all the patients undergoing surgery to alleviate the pain. But ketorolac also has an additional role in maintaining the inflammation, which in turn leads to optimal wound healing. Now, if the risk scoring before surgery was less than 5, then patients were treated with low potency steroids. And for higher risk, we used high potency steroids along with doxycycline. Now, we observed that following all these rituals religiously led to a significant reduction of haze by around 98.8%. So let's understand the normal wound healing process of cornea. After any injury or surgery, there is activation of keratocytes, which leads to activation of fibroblasts and myofibroblasts. Now, under normal wound healing conditions, these fibroblasts will get apoptotized and it will lead to normal wound healing. However, under any kind of stress, excuse me, there's excessive formation of keratocytes, which converts to myofibroblasts and fibroblasts and leads to aberrant collagen formation, which ultimately results in clinical haze. So thus modulating these risk factors pre, intra, and post-operatively will help in optimal wound healing. So what our study adds is factors driving haze were unknown. Preoperative risk factors have higher chances of post-operative haze. Risk scoring system helps us in triaging the patients and treating them accordingly. And this perfect score prevents post-operative corneal haze, thus improving the surgical success and patient satisfaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pavitra. I have a question for you. Did you correlate the amount of haze with the amount of tissue ablated or the power corrected? Because usually, as the literature says, with higher amounts of power and higher amount of tissue ablation, the incidence of haze is higher. So the study was not, it was more of a research-oriented study, I guess. It wasn't clinical correlation.
But usually our PRK patients, the MRSE, usually in all the 230 patients, the average was around 5 to 6 diopters. I mean, not more than that. So it was comparable. It was not really the extremes of anything, not very low, not very high. So it was average of around 5 to 6 diopters of MRSE. So it was comparable.
Right.
Sorry.
I think we can go to the next study if any other judge has any questions. They can ask.
No, I don't have any. Very nice study, Dr. Pavitra.
Thank you, ma'am.
We can move on to the next presentation.
Ma'am, who is the next?
The next speaker is Dr. Maurya, extensive ocular surface commerce neoplasia after clinicopathological profile and treatment outcome. Is Dr. Maurya there?
No, ma'am.
So the next speaker is Dr. Prashant Borde, effect of topical cyclosporin versus tacrolimus. Is he there?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and the next speaker is Dr. Vijay Kumar Sharma, management of anterior corneal scars, FALC, TFALC.
Yes, ma'am, I'm there.
Please present.
This. Is my slide visible?
Yes.
Yes, it's visible.
Good morning, judges and colleagues. I'll be discussing the management of anterior corneal scar by an innovative technique that we developed, that we described. This was known as tuck-in femtosecond laser-assisted lamellar keratoplasty. There are no financial disclosures. Anterior corneal layers are affected in various corneal diseases like Sargent-Nodular degenerations, viral degenerations, heel keratitis, which is primarily limited to anterior corneal layers, epithelial and stromal corneal dystrophies. SALC provides an advantage of a sutureless lamellar corneal surgery procedure. It can be done using either a microkeratome or a femtosecond laser, which can be used for cutting the donor and recipient lenticules. The traditional femtosecond laser-assisted lamellar keratoplasty, it is described to make a side cut angle of 90 degrees. The problem with both microkeratome and femtosecond laser traditionally, which is defined, is the sizing of appropriate graft and the graft host junction apposition may not be as good. So in this technique, now you can see this is a conventionally done femtosecond assisted lamellar keratoplasty, where you can see there is a gap between the donor lenticle and the recipient edges. So this can result as a nidus for infection subsequently. This was a prospective interventional case series where 15 eyes of 15 patients with anterior corneal opacities involving up to anterior 200 microns of cornea, they were taken for performing the TFALC procedure. It was done using a Visumax femtosecond workstation. All patients underwent uncorrected and best corrected visual acuity evaluation, slit lamp biomicroscopy evaluation (IOP), and the depth of corneal opacity was assessed using a anterior segment OCT. This is the video of the technique. The donor lenticule was prepared. A side cut angle of 45 degree was made instead of 90 degree. So this, by creating a 45 degree side cut, it provided a sloping edge in the sides, measuring from 100 to 400 micron, depending upon the depth of the cutting. Now this donor lenticule was prepared and removed. Then a recipient lenticule was prepared. Again, the side cut angle of 45 degree was made here. The size of the donor and the recipient lenticule were kept same. And then the dissection was carried out and the recipient lenticule was removed. Now, by creating a 45 degree angle, there was a wedge which was created in the recipient where the donor lenticule could fit in on all sides. It was placed, this is a donor lenticule being placed on the recipient bed, and the edges were tucked in. Once the edges were tucked in nicely on all around, as you can see in this video, no glue was required after the surgery. So a BCL was placed for over 3 weeks, and after 3 weeks, the BCL was removed. The size of the donor and the recipient lenticule were kept same, unlike the previously described of 0.1 millimeter oversizing. And so out of 15 patients, 5 patients had spheroidal degeneration, 6 had the heel keratitis, 3 had Sargent-Nodular degeneration, and 1 patient had vertex keratopathy. The mean preoperative depth of scar was 148 micron, and recipient lenticule was removed. Mean thickness that was removed was 153 micron, and the donor lenticule, the thickness was kept 10% more to cater for any swelling of the lenticule. And after the remodeling of the lenticule after the graft, so it was around, if we made a 150 micron depth cut for the recipient, then 165 micron was the donor lenticule thickness that was kept. You can see the edges at the graft post junction in the TFAL, where the edges were sloping, and it overlapped so well with the recipient bed that there was no wedge that was left. The visual acuity, in the mean visual acuity improved from 0.96 logMAR units to 0.52 logMAR units, with most of patients achieving 6/18 visual acuity or better. So there were 3 modifications that we did. One, 45 degree side cut angle. Second, the thickness was kept 10% more. And third, the size of the donor and the recipient lenticule was kept same. This is the largest study of femtosecond assisted SALC published so far. It was a sutureless and a glueless technique. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay. Very nice study. So did you use any other configuration of the graft and the host besides the 45-degree cut that you have mentioned? Or like in literature, they have top hat, mushroom, etc. So did you try any of
Top hat
those?
and mushroom are in the literature. They are described for the DALK and the penetrating keratoplasty, not for the anterior lamellar keratoplasty. This 45-degree side cut, it provided us an additional overlap distance of around 100 to 400 micron, whether it's a small or a bigger size. By that much of oversizing, it could be undersizing or oversizing, that could be corrected by the tucking in of the graft.
And you have recommended keeping the size of the graft and the host same, the
Same.
cuts.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, very nice study, Dr. Vijay. What I want to ask you is, like you tucked in the donor. So
Yes.
was any dissection in the recipient required for that tucking in, or only that 45-degree angles could do
Only
it?
that 45-degree angle could suffice, ma'am.
And it stayed back, like without
Stayed
suturing.
back,
You had no issues of...
no issues in these 15 patients. Now we have around 1 year follow-up of all these patients, and all the patients are doing well. It's almost similar to as a smile. The dissection is similar. There was no difficulty even with the say macular grade of corneal opacity or even a leukomatous grade corneal opacity. At some places we had some difficulty in dissections. There we use, because already we had a fixed plane, so there we use a crease and knife just to cut those small areas of difficult dissection. Otherwise, no issue. Yes.
Okay.
The lenticule thickness was also very thin, actually, almost like a LASIK flap. So
Yes.
it's
Yeah, it was 148.
Ji.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
We can move on to the next presenter.
the next presenter is Dr. Krati Gupta, a novel artificial intelligence-based application for simplified guidelines for keratoconus treatment. Is she here?
No, ma'am.
So who's the next speaker? It's Dr. Akansha Kashyap, corneal biomechanical properties in vernal keratoconjunctivitis patients. Is she here?
Okay, so I think we have one more person, Dr. Pavitra Patel. I think she missed her slot because she was presenting somewhere else.
So she's already presented here.
She's presented, okay.
Yeah, she's left for the next hall actually. Yeah. So the next speaker is Dr. Akansha Kashyap. Is she here?
No, ma'am.
So many absentees. Dr. Ankita Baheti. Is she here? Dr.
No, ma'am.
Ankita Baheti.
107, outcome of transepithelial LPT cross-linking.
Dr. Rakshi Kushumesh.
Rakhi.
Sorry,
Okay.
Rakhi Kusumesh. Is she here?
No, ma'am.
So many absentees, have they informed? Are they going to come later, or is it not going to be there?
There are hardly 3-4 presenters. Dr. J.L. Goyal. Dr. J.L. Goyal. PAC CXL. Such good studies and we don't have the presenters.
Correct.
And Dr. Ishwari Patel. And who else is left? Anybody, any other speaker, ma'am?
Keynote speakers are there.
So, ma'am, can you invite them, please?
Yes, so if you're done with the presenters, if we don't have any other presenters left, so I would be inviting our next keynote speaker, Dr. Anushri Agarwal. She'll be presenting a masterclass for all of us. So I would request Dr. Anushri Agarwal to please join us. I think she hasn't joined in yet. I'll just inform her.
I hope the speakers know how they have to log in because hardly there are any presenters in this group. We just had 3 presentations.
Raminder, this keynote, what Dr. Pavitra presented, it has to be evaluated, or?
No, it was not a keynote. I think it was a study, no? The last one. Was it a study?
But was
No,
it a AGOS Ophthalmological Society something? It has to be put in evaluation or no?
I don't think so, na? Because it's not meant. The thing. It's not a paper. Here they have.
It's a paper.
Yeah. I don't think we have to evaluate this.
Only 2.
So only 2 speakers, that means.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Vijay Kumar and Dr. Rohit.
Yeah.
So is the keynote address being delivered or not?
She's finding out, I suppose.
Yeah, so I think ma'am has just logged out. Ma'am has just logged out. We'll get in touch with her again. But till then, we can conclude this session. We can conclude this session. Whatever presenters you have gotten, you can mark the presenters, and the mark sheets need to be submitted on WhatsApp as well as on mail for this session. So once again, I would thank all of you for joining us. Thank you so much for this session, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
जुड़े दे देना कोई डाल के फिर दे देगा
Head towards the next session, I would request Dr. Anushri Agarwal, ma'am, to please switch on your video and unmute yourself, and you can start with your session now. We're starting with the masterclass by Dr. Anushri. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible. And I request Dr. Rajiv, sir, to please mute yourself. Over.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Dr. Anushri Agarwal, and I'd like to thank everyone for giving me this opportunity to present my free paper, which won the best award for the cornea in the last conference. So today I'll be talking about suturing technique in DAL for patients with keratoconus for a better visual outcome. As we all know, keratoconus is a degenerative, non-inflammatory corneal disorder characterized by progressive stromal thinning and ectasia. And in the more advanced cases, especially those with apical scarring, need surgical intervention. And deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty has increasingly been advocated as a reliable alternative to penetrating keratoplasty for the treatment of these cases due to advantages like mitigation of endothelial rejection, lesser need for post-operative steroids, early suture removal, etc. But why this study? So in our experience, we found that the patients of advanced keratoconus who underwent DALC, even though they had excellent surgical outcomes post-surgery with keratometry readings of around 44-45, in due course of time, their keratometry readings would go to over 50. Hence, we tried this new technique of donor trimming and suturing in order to maximize the visual outcome in patients with advanced keratoconus. So 70 consecutive patients who underwent DALC for advanced keratoconus were included in the study, and they were followed up for a period of minimum of 2 years. Lamp examination, uncorrected and best corrected visual acuity with refractive correction and corneal topography using Pentacam were noted at each of the follow-up visits. All the surgeries were performed under general anesthesia. After reaching the desired depth, big bubble was achieved using a 27-gauge cannula. This was followed by debulking of the superficial stroma and excision of the remaining stromal layers with the help of blunt scissors. This was followed by the graft preparation. Since we believe that the peripheral rim of host cornea could be around 450 to 500 microns, we hold the donor graft at its posterior edge, and in order to match the thickness of the peripheral host rim, the posterior edge is trimmed as shown in the video. With this, we believe that there will be a better matching of the thickness of the graft to the peripheral host rim and leading to better apposition at the graft host junction. This is followed by suturing of the graft over to the host Descemet's membrane. The knots are tightened so as to nicely flatten the graft over the host DM. During this course, we should also take care that any folds that form in the host Descemet's membrane need to be ironed out, especially if they are in the visual axis. Lastly, we believe that we need to replace the cardinal suture in order to provide that adequate flattening effect from the graft. Finally, all the 70 cases were analyzed. Coming on to the result, the mean preoperative visual acuity was around 1.219, which improved significantly post-surgery and was valued around 0.625 at 6 months, 0.518 at 1 year, and as good as 0.394 at 2 years. Also, the mean spherical equivalent was minus 8.47 preoperatively. And since the graft was nicely flattened over the host Descemet's membrane, as expected, we found a hyperopic state in the immediate post-operative period, which gradually progressed towards a more emetropic state with spherical equivalence of minus 1.14 at 2 years. The average keratometry value was 60.2 preoperatively, which improved significantly, and at 6 months, it valued at around 43.2 and started to stabilize with values of 44.1 at 1 year and 0.5 at 2 years.
Cytokines as well as your fluorescent type. With that, introduction of the graph, which is from the experiment in simulated models.
So to conclude, we feel that trimming the peripheral posterior edge of the graft tissue helps in better apposition at the graft host junction. Also, since the graft was nicely flattened over the host Descemet's membrane, it can counteract any progressive steepening effect from the peripheral rim of the ectatic host cornea. Hence, we believe that this novel technique of donor trimming and suturing can be an effective measure of improving the post-operative visual outcomes for deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty in advanced keratoconus patients. Thank you. Am I audible? Is there a network issue?
No, ma'am, you audible.
Hello, Dr. Anushri.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, this is just one question. Can this be extended to all the patients who are undergoing DALK or only in keratoconus patients?
So we tried it for keratoconus patients, but I think the concept remains the same. So maybe we can go ahead for other indications of DALK as well. Basically, we have to match the peripheral host trim.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably more useful for keratoconus since there is progressive steepening that we observed in our patients.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Anushri.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we still have some time before our next presenter comes in. If you still have some more insights to share with us, you can go ahead with it. Or if you have any questions, judges also can go ahead with it.
So this is what I presented last year. Right now we are trying to collect the anterior segment OCTs and also the pentacams so as to nicely depict how we can show the change in the keratometry readings over time and how with this technique it was kind of stable after 6 months, and then there was good visual outcome after the surgery, even up to 2 years and more follow. Like we even have follow-ups up to 4 or 5 years. So we are seeing good results for these patients as well.
So any issues of any double anterior chamber more compared to the normal DALK patients, because we are cutting the edges on the posterior aspect. So does it cause any stripping of the Descemet's membrane? Any such type of cases?
No, sir, just the routine like caution that we take during suturing. Otherwise, we didn't encounter any double anterior chambers in all of these cases, any of these cases.
So I would request if we have any more questions from any of our judges who are present today. You can go ahead with your questions. We still have more 10 minutes before our next presenter comes online. So if you have any questions for Dr. Anushri, we can go ahead with it. Okay, so I think thank you, Dr. Anushri, for the presentation. It was very insightful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Vijay, as well. Thank you so much for the